This is Lloyd Pierce. I'm an assistant coach with the Indiana Pacers, completing or starting my 15th year coaching in the NBA with other stops at Atlanta, Philadelphia 76ers, the Memphis Grizzlies, Golden State Warriors, and the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carl Suddler, and I'm an assistant professor of history at Emory University. I'm an African-American historian who studies the intersections of Black life, crime, and sports in the United States since the late 19th century.
All right, let's get this going, Carl.
Yeah. So Coach, I hope you're having a good day. I just wanted to start off by asking you about the NBA Coaches Association for Racial Justice. Right, you launched this program, became the committee chairman. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What inspired you to start this?
Yeah, in 2020, obviously, probably for our generation, probably one of the most historic years that we've all experienced with regards to the pandemic, with regards to all of the social and racial issues that were, I guess, being presented at a higher rate than we've seen due to the social media and due to the cell phones and being able to capture what a lot of us have already known, but to see it for the world to see at the same time made 2020 such a tough year, and then having a very historic election to finish the year. In the middle of all of that, I think that central piece was the George Floyd incident and that occurred in Minneapolis. And, we had a lot of hurt coaches, assistant coaches, a lot of African-American coaches who felt the pain of seeing and watching that for the world to see, and feeling helpless, hopeless, and hurt. A lot of us are fathers, brothers, sons, and I think we all experienced that traumatic video one too many times. And I think it was really kind of a bowling point for a lot of people. And it was a call of action for me specifically as a head coach at the time of the Atlanta Hawks, but really a call of action because I had a platform, I had ability to connect with our coaches, and I knew a lot of guys were hurt. And so when we finally met all 30 of the head coaches, a number of assistant coaches, we knew that as leaders, so-called leaders in our profession, we knew in order for us to lead, we were going to have to really help each other out and then find direction on what leadership in this arena was going to require. And so we formed the Coaches for Racial Justice Committee. I've been appointed the chair, and it was an opportunity really to be educated on how to help our players. And we knew the trickle-down effect of their pain and their trauma, and what they were in a position to do as well. We knew they were going to need support. We knew they were going to need help, and we wanted to be able to do that, but it required us being educated and guided in a way that was tangible, and in actions that we could use our resources and our platform to really help move some things in our communities. There's 30 NBA communities that are represented in the NBA that we can impact. Some things that are going to be hard to change and some things we won't see in our generation, but I do think there's an opportunity for us to help 30 NBA cities and the rest of our country grow from some of the experiences we saw in 2020. And that's how the Coaches for Racial Justice was formed, with a very sustainable and long-lasting impact was our goal, and that's really what we're committed on doing. For you, I'd like to ask you, the need to reform criminal justice, the criminal legal system goes beyond justice for wrongly convicted people. What would you say to people who are just opening their eyes to the injustice of the prison system and the criminal justice system? What would you say to them? Talk to us a bit about the many issues our carceral system faces.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. There's an activist, scholar, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who encourages us to think of ways that we can change everything. And this has helped many, myself included, transform how we think about the criminal legal system, right? It can be daunting, this this challenge of thinking about ways of changing everything, but it also presents infinite opportunities of ways to get in, right? And so it's two different ways that you can think of this, right? You can think of, changing everything as this kind of daunting challenge that, if you try to change everything, you're going to change nothing. Or you can think of this that everybody can have a different position and role in playing and thinking of ways that we can transform the criminal legal system in the United States. And, as scholars who think of this work, as activists who think of this work, and organizers, we use that language of carcerality, or, the carceral state, which at its root word just means of or belonging to prisons, right? And we use this to kind of invoke a wide range of punitive state action. So this includes, issues and challenges that are presented by police, right, as an entity, policing as a verb, as an action, border patrol, public and private surveillance, incarceration, restrictive and means-tested welfare and social service policies, right? Because all of these various systems have links to broader or the broader kind of criminal legal system and juvenile legal system, right? We have a separate system that kind of, pushes young people through this as well. And so, for folks who are just getting into this or for the first time, I tell them often, think about ways that we can change everything, because this isn't a one size fits all kind of problem in front of us. And once we kind of realize that it's not a daunting ask to change everything, but it's a welcoming invitation of thinking of ways that we can get in and get invested in different spaces that all include, or that become all encompassing of this broader system that has controlled so much of how we've moved as a country and as a globe, we really kind of find our legs, or we can really kind of find something to do regardless of what our platforms may be. And, with that, right, when I hear about the work that the NBA coaches are doing, it speaks about just that, right? It speaks about platform, right? That, so coach, you have a very unique position to influence the players, influence the fans. And it's powerful, right? Athletes and coaches and sports in the United States in general has kind of, this unique position that many see as unifying, but also see as a space of opportunity, right? And so do you think that being a coach puts you in this kind of unique position to influence the people watching as well as the people you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. You use the word daunting. And, I think for a lot of us who haven't spent the amount of time that a lot of local and grassroots organizations and a lot of activists and a lot of legal folks have in trying to find solutions to some of these problems, it can be, and it was daunting for us as coaches. And I thought the beauty of us forming the Coaches for Racial Justice, it gave us an opportunity during a downtime that we weren't used to having. It gave us an opportunity to use that time appropriately, but also to, as we're trying to figure out how we can help, really not overemphasize the work, or not underappreciate the work that a lot of the organizations that are on the ground that are doing, but how we could help partner with some of these organizations and some of these people. This isn't an area that I'm an expert in. And so to feel like I can just jump in is daunting. But to be educated on where I can help, and to be educated on which groups fit the need that's appropriate for whatever city I may be in or community that I may be in, I think that's where our true value, that's what we were able to discover. Our true value lies in assisting and being educated on how we can assist people that have been in the fight for a long period of time. I think one of the things I learned early on is a lot of people can take offense to those that just jump in and try and get solutions without having any backdrop or any prior record of what it takes, what it requires, and what's needed in the work that has been done. How can we assist? A lot of people that I was able to get in contact with, groups that I was able to get in contact with, the NAACP chapter of Georgia, the Georgia Innocence Project, who I'm working with. A lot of those groups needed a platform to get their messaging out, to get their work out, to find more additional support. And so I think that as coaches, that's really where our value lies. Our players have a tremendous opportunity to be leaders. They can reach pretty much anyone. They do have access to pretty much anyone. They do have the type of resources that are needed to fund a group's activism, to fund the group's efforts, to put on a program, to raise money, to raise awareness, whatever the case may be. But they have a platform that can reach millions of people, of fans, of communities, and at the local level and at the federal level. So it's important for us as coaches to help guide them, to help have those conversations. I think the one thing I learned, the players felt that it was daunting as well, especially those that have never spoken out on things that were about community, about themselves, about their race, about inequalities, injustice. Those are hard topics if you haven't experienced it firsthand or you don't have the education of it. And so it's really an opportunity for us over dinner, after practice, to sit down with guys and just talk about life and talk about, what bothers them, what they're feeling, and what they would like to do to join the fight. And maybe it's not as daunting when you start pointing people in the right direction and you start bringing in those that are willing to assist, and it gives them a sense of responsibility and ownership that they can join in and have a part in whatever they feel is necessary. And for me, working with the Georgia Innocence Project, working with the homeless group in the city of Atlanta, I tried to lend my support and my help to those who were kind of the voice for the voiceless. And, I really found that was where I felt most comfortable, but I think anyone can find their opportunity. And that's where we've tried to guide and help our players. And so daunting for me, when you brought that word up, was really kind of that first initial reaction when we started going as coaches. I think we were all, well, how do we help? Problems in Atlanta are different than problems in Salt Lake City, and they're different than problems here in Indianapolis, and are different than those that are in California. And so it's really, finding what's best for you, and then, trying to branch out, but really being educated was how we were guided. So, it takes a different tone. But I'll ask you this question. You've devoted your career to studying African-American history, especially the carceral system and sports history. Are those topics related? What you're studying from a historical standpoint, what you're seeing from a sports standpoint, and how do you think they intersect if they are?
Yeah, no, I mean, even hearing the way in which you entered, right? These kinds of steps into these various processes, remind us that there are people who've done this before, right? That there are people who have faced these challenges before. African-American history becomes sort of that lens that allows us to pull on so many examples from the past. I often tell my students, right, I'm a professor, right? So I think about like my space as being the classroom and, outside the classroom, but always working with students in different capacities, is that even though history, I'm not one of those historians who believes that history repeats itself, but I tell my students, but history certainly rhymes, right? And so we can see, there are too many lessons to be learned from the past, right? For us to just kind of overlook, and for us to kind of think that, what we're entering is something new, and something new in a way that we can't pull from the past. And so, when I think about, the broader kind of African-American history, or the lessons from, African-American history as a field, that's all about people. And so, when we think about kind of the carceral system or sports history, right, this then becomes all about systems. Right. And so for me, historian Elizabeth Hinton, she argues that, the foundational logic of American policing is about maintaining social order through surveillance and social control. And this logic can be applied in so many different facets of life, right? And so I'm always thinking about ways to identify these boundaries, to imagine ways that we can create a world where these no longer need to persist, right? And so, yeah, African American history primes me as a historian to teach these lessons because of those countless stories of survival, of resistance, of persistence in a country that has regularly invented and reinvented many of these boundaries and many of these logics. And this includes sports, right? And so, I think, it's important for athletes, for coaches, who are navigating the sports world to, spend time looking at sports history, at least, modern sports history. And, I say modern, which probably includes like the past 150 years or so, but, just so we can see the hidden fingerprints of how these carceral boundaries have actually worked their way in, because it's tricky, right? And I think it's important for us to be able to identify them, to realize what's working, what's not working. Because if we take that, if we believe that the foundational logic of policing is about maintaining social order and, with surveillance and with control, we can see that in sports as well, right? And so, for me, I think about, if African American history, is about the people, right? And the people and how people have persisted and resisted and survived amongst these systems that have regularly been invented and reinvented over time. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I think, through it, we're often, if when we kind of, I jokingly say, when we reach back to our ancestors, right, the answers are there for us to move forward with, right, and to think about moving forward with. And, again, I think athletes have regularly been in positions, and coaches have regularly been in positions, even when we're thinking about U.S. history, African American history, right, to utilize those platforms and to think about ways in which they can create avenues or help build avenues, with folks who are on the ground. And I'm always excited to hear people, recognize that these issues are local, right? That these issues aren't, like they're national and they're global in a sense that everybody seems to be going against something. The responses can't be, one size fits all model, right? There are too many variables, right? And so, while we can talk about issues of incarceration as a global issue or a global problem, how you fix it, varies by locale. And so, it's always important for us to connect to these local organizations, as you were mentioning. But with that, right, I talk about stories of survival and resistance, and it's because that, systems resist themselves, right? Like systems resist to being torn down. I tell my students that all the time. And because of that, you have to find the ways, or you have to find the avenues that'll put you in the best position. And, and players see this, right, coach? I mean, like we know the rhetoric, right? We know that when players come out speaking about issues, the initial gut response from mainstream public is, you're a player, right? Shut up and play, right? Or shut up and dribble, or, and this isn't a new rhetoric, right? This is something that has been told to athletes time and time again. And so, as a coach, I can imagine it's difficult to encourage or to think about encouraging players to utilize their platforms and to utilize their positions when, so many of them are kind of reminded really quickly that, what they're supposed to be doing is playing, right? Shutting up and playing, keeping that politics out of sports, as if sports hasn't been inherently political from the outset. And so what do you have to say to people who argue that sports players should just shut up and play?
Well, I think the beauty of sports has taught us all a lot of valuable lessons. And when you think of just the concept of team and sport and competition, you have to persist. The whole beauty of competition is overcoming something and trying to get the victory and striving together, bringing a group together strive together for a common goal, which is to win, to be victorious. And along the way, there are a lot of obstacles and journeys and things you have to go through. So you're constantly in a position where you have to persist and overcome the many obstacles that will come your way. You can't predict what those obstacles are. So it's our job as coaches to help maximize our players' ability. And I firmly believe when you're able to maximize a person's ability, it starts with their character. It starts with their being. And when you see our players, our athletes of today, our younger generation athletes on the court, on the field, are those in the younger generation that are not athletes. I think one of the things that's most encouraging is their passion and their commitment and their ability to stand up and speak out. And so as a coach, how do I maximize the person first is always going to be my goal, because I think that will enhance the player. I think if their character is developed, if their ability to do more, to say more, to be more, if they find that they have a sense of purpose, they're gonna strive to be greater on the court, on the field, and off. And so, I think it's a little reckless to say that anyone should stay in their lane, because that means we know what someone's lane is and we're trying to minimize what they're capable of doing or what they're able to do elsewhere. I think it's up to us to determine what our own lanes are and what we want to do and what we would like to expand to becoming. So, I strongly believe it's reckless for anyone to criticize another person about what they can and can say and what they should and shouldn't do. And I think it's a huge compliment to all athletes who have spoken up, who have been committed to doing work for their communities, for their families, for the sport, to be an ambassador for the sport, because it really shows their commitment to community. It shows their commitment to others. It shows their belief about the human race and about people. And I think, when you're in a team environment, that's what it's all about. It's committing to one another. It's committing to others. It's finding a greater purpose to help others. And we're doing the same thing on the court. We're asking them to do the same thing on the court. Why not ask them to do the same thing off the court? And so, yeah, it's reckless to me to minimize a person's ability. But I applaud our players. I applaud all athletes for going above and beyond to help really fight the inequalities and injustices that we're seeing in our society. What about you? What kind of shaped your beliefs to get into this fight for social justice?
Yeah, I mean, I tell my students all the time, if you study history and don't feel like, and don't feel enraged, right? Enraged to the point that you want to become engaged, then I don't know what you're studying, right? It's hard to look back to the past and not be inspired by what folks have been able to survive in this country and what folks have been able to endure and to get through. And I think what really kind of inspires me, or what motivates me to always be involved and think about ways of utilizing my platform as a college professor, is that I tell folks, when you study the past, there have been professors in these positions before, right? Whether you're talking about somebody in the early 20th century like a W.E.B. Du Bois, right? Like, whenever I teach a Du Bois text, I remind my students, right, Du Bois was a college professor. Like his life, went beyond the classroom. But when he wrote a text like Souls of Black Folk that we still read in 2020 and 2021, it's impossible to know in that moment in which he's writing it that it was still going to be read over 100 years later. And so, thinking about lessons like that, or, if we think about it in the sports world, right, somebody like Harry Edwards, right, who has inspired athletes regularly, was a college professor. And so I think, there are lessons to be had about how scholars and activists as an identity have merged in the past of thinking of ways to be engaged in various communities. And, to your point about thinking, it's not just about athletes, right? It's not just about college students, right? That this is a lesson that can be, you know, applied to just about anyone. I think what the young people passion represents, right, today is that there's something wrong in front of us,
Right.
right? And they're motivated to figure out the best ways in which to get it fixed. It's difficult for young folks to think that they have all the answers as much as they, often want to, but it's important for people in positions, whether it's a coach or whether it's a professor or whether it's a teacher or whether it's a mentor, to help guide, right? Without putting their hands too much in, right? It's important for the young people to kind of explore these things on their own. But I tell students all the time, like, your energy isn't misguided, right? What you're seeing is a truth, right? How you get to kind of the answer, you might want to seek out some, some of the elders, right? Whether it's the elders in front of you or whether it's the elders in text. You might want to seek out how people have navigated these spaces before, but don't let your energy be described as misguided, right? Because that energy and that passion is actually a direct correlation to the injustices that you see before you. And so I often tell people, like, young people seem agitated, right? And young people seem energized, and and that's a sign that what they're recognizing in front of them is something that's inherently wrong. And they want to see this do better, and they want to see us do better. And I also think it's important for us as leaders in the various capacities to emulate a certain type of characteristic, to emulate a certain kind of behavior, that inspires them to show that you can be in a position of power and still challenge the powers that be. And so I think about these things regularly. And so whether it's inspiring folks to get involved with organizations like the Innocence Project, or to really tackle wrongful convictions, or to really think about how can they help ways to get involved, and and how they can get involved in ways to right the wrongs of a justice system that have regularly, times and times again, reminded us that they're not invested in justice. I think I think it's encouraging, right, to often see these young people take that kind of energy, take that kind of passion, and direct it in ways in which they can, find some right amongst these wrongs. And so, I know we had some overlap here in Atlanta while you were down here. I've known you to work with Georgia Innocence Project, and so what made you interested, though, in working with these kinds of wrongful convictions, or what did you find? Like, how did you make that connection? What inspired you to make that connection?
Yeah, for me, it's the power of that all moment. I spoke at the Innocence Network in 2019 in Atlanta. Prior to that, I had heard a speaker, Dewey Bozzella, who was an exonerated individual out in New York. He spoke to our team when I was coaching in Memphis, and we brought him into Philadelphia, and he spoke to our group and told about his experience. And you're in awe of what the Innocence Project was capable of doing. And it was the first time that I had heard about the Innocence Project. And so when I was invited to speak at the Innocence Network, which was being hosted in Atlanta, I was honored to do it, but didn't understand the magnitude of power that was in that room. And within about the first 30 minutes, I had met many exonerees who knew who I was as a head coach, introduced themselves, and then shared a bit of their story. And to see and feel the joy of life being given back to them was powerful. It was emotional, but you understood how wrong the system has been for so many people. And so, understanding more about what the Innocence Project has done and is committed to doing in our, prison population of folks. I believe there's anywhere from any given year 1% to 6%, and maybe even higher, of wrongfully convicted individuals in this country. which represents almost 200,000 people.
Right.
It's scary to think that 200,000 people, one person is wrongfully incarcerated, and the amount of years they're spending due to false testimony, due to, having an informant lie, not having the funds to get out of the legal system, to understand that these people are trapped in a system that's warped, that's wrong. And there's an organization, there's a group of people that are committed and passionate about helping them right their wrong. I just felt I'd be wrong to walk out of the Innocence Network that I was speaking at and not get involved. And, that inspired my wife and I to really figure out how, and then figure out what. And, we felt awareness, resources, giving resources, and doing whatever we could to bring more and more people to the network, to the Innocence Project, to learn about what they're doing and hopefully get involved. And so that was kind of how I got involved. There's so many reasons why people are behind bars, but for those that don't deserve to, and if there's someone that's out there helping, we wanted to be a part of it. And that's how we got connected with the Georgia Innocence Project. And, happy that we did do that. At that Innocence Network, I was able to meet some really cool people. Raymond Santana was one from the Central Park Five. I know you wrote about the Central Park Five, a group of Black men who were wrongly convicted in New York of raping a white woman. It exposes the fundamental injustice of our legal system. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know we have a little bit of time left, but speak on that, because it's a popular story.
No, I was excited, to have the opportunity to write in for a big platform like the Washington Post about the Exonerated Five experience, because, again, the historian in me is like, as popular as this story is, it's also connected to longer histories, right? The Exonerated Five weren't the first wrongfully convicted group, right? Not let alone individual, but group of, young Black people in this country. I write about issues like, or groups like the Harlem Six, right? There was the Trenton Six, right? All in the 60s. We can take it back to the Scottsboro Boys, right? We can think about the Louisville Nine. Like there are all these kind of groupings in which we've seen stories of kind of group wrongful convictions work out in very similar ways, right? The Exonerated Five, gave us different types of mediums to be able to explore their stories and get them out in different ways because of the times, because of kind of it being New York and opening up the media circus that is off in New York City, right? We just have stories about everything around. So to be able to piecemeal these stories together in the defense is important. But more than anything, what I wanted to do when I wrote about their experiences was not only show that the Exonerated Five wasn't the first nor the last, but I wanted to show that this kind of idea of group convictions was a method, right? Was deliberate, because there's a lot that goes behind what happens or how we think about a particular groups of people with group convictions. Right, that these can't be kind of determined, or they're never read by the public as sort of like individual acts of random violence, right? But instead, group convictions allow narratives to be pushed into the discourse, whether it's print media or mainstream media or very social media, right? Like group convictions allow very in a way, right, very kind of racist discourse to persist around who these people are and who these people represent. But that this is a tactic that has been employed time and time again over history, and continues to be deployed, about what we get out or what we get out of these moments is that people aren't committing, again, these random acts of violence, right? They can't be read as being random or, individualized acts, but that these groups of people, group convictions actually speak to kind of a particular behavior that is tied to the people in which they are kind of, or the populations that they are part of. And that's just wrong, right? Like, and not only is it wrong, but it's also very deliberate, right? And I wanted to be able to expose and make sure that people realize that this is a tactic that has been employed time and time again. And it just speaks to, basically where we started, right? It speaks to being able to expose the hidden fingerprints of the carceral state in different mediums, right? That this group of young men, they were convicted before they were convicted by a judge, right? That they were convicted by court of public opinion, right? That they were convicted by the media, that they were, and it's important for us, to be able to help shape narratives, right? And that's where I see myself as a scholar outside of the classroom, to really be able to help shape narratives about the people in which we're invested in, about the communities in which we're invested in. To be sure that what we're doing or what we're not doing is using kind of these platforms in ways that encourage people to think about other people in very particular ways, right? And so, so I know, we're running out of time here. Coach, as always, it's always a pleasure to get together to talk about these kinds of things. We have a lot of overlap and interest, and I'm always, excited to have these opportunities.
No, this is great. Again, I really applaud the Georgia Innocence Project. And, for me, it's been such a personal victory to partner with an organization that includes me to try and help spread awareness. But I think anyone that's listening, it is daunting. However, it's a responsibility. It's a duty of all of ours to help improve our lives, our communities, our families. And I encourage all of you to just find your passion, find your way to speak up and speak out on things, and to join forces with those that are doing the same. But this is just a step. This isn't the solution, but this is just a step for all of us to continually be educated. I learned a lot from you, and this is why I wanted to do this with you. But I really just encourage people to listen, to have these type of conversations, and then figure out how they can help others do better in addition to themselves. So appreciate you coming on and speaking about all of this with me today.
Yeah, for sure.